What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
CJ Wilson is an American car racer and former professional baseball pitcher. CJ pitched in Major League Baseball for the Texas Rangers from 2005 to 2011 and the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim from 2012 to 2015. Race Dog, aka CJ, is also the co-host of the Throttle Dogs podcast, where they talk about cars, food, cars, racing cars, and lessons for success while enjoying Nutella. CJ Wilson, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you?
Good, man. Good. Thanks, Cedric. It's cool. You know, this whole podcasting format, I think a lot of people have taken off with it, and it's a lot more fun than when I was playing baseball, because I would have to do like these radio shows and it would be like 6 minutes or 4 minutes. And then, you know, they're like, hey, so you're left-handed, right? I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, I'm ambidextrous, but I throw a lefty and I right-handed. And they're like, okay, that was all we had. Thank you. I'm like, right. What is that? You know?
I totally forgot about that. Like I did a little work in film and TV, and I would go on the press junkets for the movies. And I'm kind of familiar with that sort of like circuit for, you know, kind of those 6-minute conversations, but I didn't even think about how you had to do that talk radio show circuit. And probably some of those were at like 6 a.m. when you had a 7 p.m. game, or whenever they kind of called you in. And comedians do that. That's wild. You know, we met on Clubhouse. I thought that was a really interesting way to connect. And kind of speaking about how you think podcasting is kind of like maybe better than baseball, you said, because you don't have to do the radio show circuit. I think of podcasting as the closest thing I've gotten back to doing sports. So, you know, most of my career is very like sit down at a desk, you know, work on paperwork, analysis, spreadsheets, but you're not in the moment per se. You're not live. You're not. And that's one thing that I've really missed from my youth, is just kind of being in sports and having that very present feeling. I find that to be just an incredible mind state. And I live for that.
Well, when you're in a big crowd, especially, and you're watching a really tuned up sports team play, whether it's a hockey game, a baseball game, you're at a race, whatever it is, and the whole crowd, you feel that energy just building up like a big dance song the whole time until like the crescendo of the fourth quarter or the ninth inning or whatever. I mean, that's a real thing. We like to connect. It's been a difficult year for people to get that, you know, that connection, because it is nice to meet new people and things like that, but it is difficult when you're used to, especially as a sports guy, this high energy level, or, you know, like for me, it's movies. Like I don't get to go to movies anymore. And it's kind of, you know, it's kind of depressing for me not to be able to go to the movies, but I do feel like the way everything is sort of happened, especially the last maybe 4 or 5 months with Clubhouse, I think there's a lot of people reaching out to each other. People were in the same rooms. Hey, let's talk. I've got a podcast, you know, let's do this thing. And it's a great way to put out content. You know, it requires 2 people effectively, maybe even 1 person, if it's just somebody that wants to have their own like radio show. But you know, the podcasting thing for me was nice because I felt like I got to dive deeper. You know, I got to actually talk about like a layer of a subject way below, you know, than we would normally touch on, just introducing somebody through, you know, normal radio or TV interviews.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up, you know, sports and connections. And I do find in this current year, it's been hard to connect. I think that even with sports, I've connected less with sports. You know, I grew up an avid baseball fan. It's probably my least favorite sport to play. I grew up playing soccer, and I like those kind of sports where you're just back and forth, and until the ball goes out of play, it's just, you could be on defense, you could be on offense. So things like basketball, soccer, but baseball, I played it, but it was really, I just grew to love the game. And I love that connection, mostly with my dad growing up, with my pop and watching the game and being at his knee. I grew up in the early 80s and 80s. So like I was a Don Mattingly fan and Keith Hernandez fan and Gary Carter. And, you know, when the Mets won it all in 1986, I just was a Mets fan for life. That sort of like, I think that not you or anybody, but like, I feel like most people connect with either their home team, the team that wins it all, or maybe their team their parents or dad roots for. And I kind of had that all. Well, my dad grew up a Dodgers fan, and they left, so he was abandoned. And so he just kind of rooted for the Yankees and Mets. And that's why we kind of tolerated them both in the house. And I even see those as like almost like big brothers. So like I'm going to root for the Mets if they play the Yankees, but like if anyone else is playing the Yankees, I'll probably root for the Yankees. But
yeah, because it's a New York thing at that point, right?
For me,
so,
yeah,
I get that.
But I don't celebrate a Yankee win like it would be a Mets win. It wouldn't get me the same way. It's just like, yeah, that's cool. And I'd be cool if they lost too, that'd be cool. And I would never wear Yankee gear, but I do think about like maybe raising my kids as Yankees fans so they'd have a better life than me, So, but
something more to look forward to.
Yeah. But as I get older, I do connect less with, professional baseball players in terms of rooting for the individual or even rooting for the laundry on the team. And the more I learn about sports and life, I wonder, how true it is, but I'm guessing that the athletes, they celebrate their wins and losses with the other team after the game to some extent. You might have a friend that you played with in the minors.
Yeah.
You might catch dinner. So off the field, it's back to business, or it's back to actually being personal. And it's not, enemies off the field like we might envision it at home,
Yeah. I mean, I think like it's a personality thing. Like you have a lot of players that had a hometown buddy or a crosstown rival, or like a guy that went to college with, or whatever, a minor league best friend that gets traded. And then you do end up on other teams. I had a couple guys that I was really familiar with, and I think guys that I was interested in, but from like a competition standpoint, like, oh, we were drafted the same year and we played against each other all the way growing up. And then it'd be like, hey, you again, hey, what's up? But I would say for me, the baseball thing was really more like a martial art. Like I just wanted to be a black belt, I wanted to really just internalize that challenge and that struggle to figure out what the what the skill development looked like and what I could do to get the most out of myself. And that to me was the most important thing. I knew I only had so many, throws in my arm. I was only going to make so many pitches before my arm like fell off. I had 5 arm surgeries throughout my career, which was, I would say, less than pleasant. But a lot of good life lessons come from injuries. And I think that's one of the things that helped me in real life, was having the sort of sports injuries to kind of come back from, because that's more the real world than just infinite success or some ramp that just keeps going up. And, your concept of reality gets skewed a lot as a baseball player, especially because you're so focused on that micromanaging that one thing. You're trying to figure out, how do I learn this skill? How do I get better at this? How do I beat this particular player or team or whatever? And so for me, I was like this. I was very much like, I'm here to perform. I want to be the best I can be. I owe it to the fans, I owe it to the teammates. And like, to the point that I wouldn't really socialize a lot. But there was players that, because I like the game so much, that I was sort of in awe of them, like Mariano Rivera. So when I got a chance to like meet Mariano Rivera, it was the best. 2007, we're in Yankee Stadium, and my pitching coach at the time had coached him because he was a pitching coach for the Yankees. And he was like, "You're a big Mariano fan, huh?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm the biggest Mariano fan." And he's like, "You want to meet him? Want to meet Mo?" I'm like, "Yeah, like, I guess, sure, whatever." Like, And at the time, I was transitioning into being a closer. So I had been like a setup guy or whatever. And so we talked for a little bit in the outfield, and he goes, "Let me see your eyes." And he like puts his sunglasses down and he goes, "Stare into my eyes. Let me see if you're serious." I was like, "What is this? What kind of bizarre initiation? This closer initiation is this?" And he's like, "Okay, man, you got it. You got the eyes. You're good." I was like,
wild.
"Okay." But there's like little funny things. At the end of the day, like everybody has a personality. Everybody has a family. They have a hometown. And there's a lot of really interesting people that play sports. When you get a chance to meet them, and sort of humanize the competition a little bit, it gets even funnier, because then you have like these little inside jokes that go forever and ever and ever. And, you develop like these little things. Maybe they're just in your head, maybe they're between both players, but where, you throw a pitch to a guy, like I threw a pitch to David Ortiz, like exploded his bat. And then the next day I talked to him, like I'm sitting there, and Boston's tiny, like the Boston, Fenway Park's like this, right? And so once they're taking batting practice, like you walk out of the dugout, you're like right in the batting cage for batting practice. So we're stretching or whatever. He goes, "Dude, that's messed up, man. I gotta get a new bat now. That was my lucky bat." And I was like, "Hey, you could just not swing. I might walk you. I'm pretty wild." And he goes, "No, man, you throw fastballs. I like it. You like it's a challenge, bro. You know what I'm saying?" And like he's just like, "Whoa," like about everything. So then it became a thing. like me and Poppy, like we would have these showdowns, and then like if I struck him out or something, I'd look at him and I'd just be like, like maybe try to bunt because we're playing the shift, just weird shit like that. It's just funny things that would happen.
Yeah, I love Big Poppy. That was probably one of my favorite eras in baseball, with the Yankees and the Red Sox and them two going at it and just spending all the money they could and bringing in all the stars. And it just seemed to be a great rivalry, and it was tense. When did you know that you could play? And you kind of mentioned, you run into some players and you might be able to tell they're better than you. It's like, when did you know that you were a lot better than, everyone in your town? And then at some point, maybe everyone for 3 or 4 towns away. And,
it wasn't like that for me, man. Like
Sure.
I was probably the best player on my like 11-year-old and 12-year-old team, but that doesn't mean anything because there was kids on other teams that were way better than I was. And I was small. I was a little guy. So I looked at it like I had to be technically perfect in order to make up for my size deficiency at the time. And then as my body, caught up, then, I'm like 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", 5'8". I'm starting to hit for power, hit the ball over the fence, start to throw a little bit harder. I always had a really good swing because I worked on it nonstop. I mean, I was just always working on my swing, working on my pitching delivery, working on ground balls. I loved the work aspect of baseball where you have to do your 100 swings a day. I'd be like, fuck it, I'll take 125 swings a day, 150 swings, 200 swings a day. And so I was trying to sneak in like little arbitrage things like that, where I was trying to get a little bit extra time. So in high school, like the thing that I'm probably most proud of in terms of this is that I used to, after 4th period, we would have lunch. I would run to the baseball locker room, throw my backpack in there, change into my practice shirt and my practice shorts, and then my teammate Brandon would run and get the food, and he would bring food for both of us because we had exchanged cash. He would bring both of our pizzas and both of our drinks to the batting cage. I would unlock the batting cage. We would turn on the machine and we would hit for 42 minutes. So just him and me. We would be like eating pizza and like wham, wham, and like hitting. And then we developed all these really bizarre routines and stuff like that. We used to like bring a boombox out there and like play Jimi Hendrix while we were hitting to try to like get more rhythm or whatever, It was really kind of funny. And that's when I realized that I was really willing to sacrifice pretty much anything in order to get to my goal, in terms of like, okay, I don't need to spend time doing anything else. I need to spend time doing baseball, and we would hit on Sundays. His dad would throw us batting practice. We had this other guy that would come out, it was a really good deal. And the hardest thing when you're a hard worker is finding other people to work with, because it always ends up in this leader of the pack situation where you're kind of running away from everybody. And a lot of people get this sort of bias because they're like, oh, I win every race, I'm the fastest person or whatever. But it doesn't really matter if the people you're racing are slow, right? You need to have a real challenge. You need to have something, maybe give everybody a head start, then race or something. You change the game a little bit. So Brandon and I, his name is Brandon Cox. He was a catcher and I was a pitcher and I was an outfielder. And so we would work together and we would talk and have all these like really extensive conversations about baseball. And we would both do like hitting impersonations. We were like, oh, who's this? Who's this? You know what I mean? And then he'd be like, well, who's this? And so it became fun and we made work really fun. And that's when I knew that I was willing to slave away for it, even if I didn't have the level of success. But then, I had injuries all the time and stuff like that. So I didn't have like this, I wasn't like this Mike Trout player that was a nationally recognized player as a, 17 or 18-year-old. That was not the situation at all.
Yeah. When do you think, it sounds like you were very laser focused on baseball from an early age. And I wonder there, is the hinge that you were like, I'm going to make baseball work for me and I'm going to will it? Or did you recognize that maybe you had a talent for baseball and you had an opportunity to push yourself over the hill?
No, it was more the willing it,
yeah.
I think, because, I had plenty of people tell me that I sucked. I wasn't that good. My first coach was like, hey, quit and go play soccer. You're probably better at that. You like running around and you have no hand-eye coordination. That's what he told me. So, but, I do tell this story a lot, so I apologize if I'm blowing through it, but I started reading baseball books. And then once I started reading baseball books, I became so much more aware of all the subtle aspects of the game. So I read Wade Boggs' book. I read Tom Seaver's book. I read a book by a sports psychologist guy named Ken Revisa called Heads Up Baseball. I read Ted Williams' book. I read Nolan Ryan's Pitcher's Bible. I just kept digesting as much as I could. Then I read the physics of baseball. So I kept going through all these things to say like, oh, okay, well, what I need to figure out is the equation between a heavy bat, a light bat, bat speed, bat control, and I started coming up with these sort of relationship ideas. So if I stand with my feet square to home plate versus if I stand a little bit open, then if I stand a little bit open like Jim Tomei, maybe I can pull the ball a little bit easier. If I stand a little bit closed like Manny Ramirez, maybe I can drive the ball to the opposite field. If I do this, if I hold my hands low like Bernie Williams, then maybe I can kind of, get rhythm with my whole body at the same time, because then my body's more coordinated. Like you start to think about all these things as a player, and in a way, learn by mimicking. Try it, you see if it works, and then you can kind of like, go from there. But it was, what a time to be alive as a kid, right? Like 1990, like think about where baseball was in 1990. Ricky Henderson, Bo Jackson, Nolan Ryan. Like legendary players. Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds, Frank Thomas. These are the guys that kind of era. And then Manny Ramirez is on the scene. And then the Indians are gnarly. And the Yankees are gnarly. It was a great time to be a fan. There was so much good baseball happening at that time. And, and the Braves, obviously the Braves had the Maddox, Smoltz, Glavine trio for years. And that was sick. And TBS was always on. So you always get to watch Braves games, and like what better guy to watch than, than vintage Greg Maddux or vintage John Smoltz or me as a lefty, Tom Glavine, who was kind of like a regular sized guy that didn't throw 96 miles an hour. He was like a 87 to 92, maybe 93, a little bit, good changeup cutter, some stuff like that. Watching guys like that, I was like, dude, he's doing it. Look at him. He's not some beast like Randy Johnson. He's not some superhuman. He's a regular sized guy. Seeing Pedro, I'm like, okay, well, Pedro throws like 97. I can't do that. I'm a little kid. I can't throw 97 yet. But Tom Glavine doesn't throw as hard as Pedro, and they're both winning, awards and stuff like that. So there's something there. And that was kind of the way I always looked at it. I said, okay, these guys are doing it. They're regular sized guys. I'm my dad's like 6 feet tall. He's like $170. Like, I just need to be bigger than him. Like, I'll be fine,
Right.
I would say maybe my freshman year of college, maybe senior year of high school, I started to have success against like top tier players. They'd have some guy that came in, this guy throws 95. And it's like, all right, bam. And I could smoke the ball off him. And I'd be like, so I think the most gnarly thing that I did maybe my freshman year was I hit a home run off a guy named Colby Lewis, who ended up playing for the Rangers as teammates years later. He was at Fresno City College. I was at Santa Ana College. He was a huge prospect, threw really hard, through 94 to 96, big guy. But I recognized that he didn't really have the ability to throw a curveball for a strike. So I just dialed in his fastball. And then my first at bat, I hit like a triple. My second at bat, I got ahead 2-0. And I said, I'm literally just going to hit a home run. I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to swing early, and I'm going to hit a home run. I hit a home run. Then my next time up, I'm like, I'm just going to do that same shit again. Like, I'm just, he threw me a pitch like a little bit outer half, and I pulled it off the end of the bat a little bit, hit the fence for a double. And I'm like, greatest hitter alive. Like, this is the easiest thing ever. Like, I know exactly what to do. I would say that you have those confident moments where you sort of get in the zone, you get in the flow, and that really helps. I would say someone like me that had been a late bloomer, that I'm like, okay, well, I'm able to kind of do this David Goliath thing and take down the guy that throws really hard. Now I just need to be able to pitch and take out the super prospect guys. But played against like Barry Zito and Eric Chavez and Milton Bradley and a lot of what's the guy's name? One more guy, forget his name. Anyways, there was this league in Long Beach that they played at Blair Field, which is like it's like a college stadium. And the year after all the seniors got drafted, they all played in this one league, the summer league, until they were signing their contracts or going to, 4-year schools or whatever. And so I was a high school sophomore going into my junior year. And so I'm there as like a 15-year-old playing against all these like man-child guys, like dudes that were either first rounders or, eventual major league all-stars or whatever. And I remember seeing Barry Zito throw a curveball, and I was like, what was that?
12 to 6.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like 1996. Okay. So like after his senior year of high school, he goes, boom, and just throws this freaking rainbow curveball. And I was like, that's the nastiest shit I've ever seen. Like, that's unbelievable.
Right.
So it was stuff like that you see like, okay, that's how good is. That's good. I need to be as good as that or better eventually, and you have a reference. And I think that helped me a lot.
Yeah. It seems like you really saw sports as a series of calculations, and you extrapolated patterns and trends and kind of worked at it like maybe like a craftsman, more than, it sounds like a little bit more than an artist, where you were just trying to key in on the technical aspects of the game and the fundamentals and just benchmarking and looking at stats, numbers, and just really going by data-driven results. And, as you brought up Oakland and Eric Chavez and Miguel Tejada and Barry Zito and Mark Mulder and two cousins. I lived out there when those guys were all playing. And my best friend, one of my best friends out there, was the director of ticket sales for Oakland. So I would go to like 40, 50 games a year, and I got real familiar with that team. So that was also another exciting.
That was a fun team to watch, man. They were good.
Yep.
They were a really good team.
And one of my really good friends in high school, he was drafted around 49th round, and lefty pitcher, kind of like hoping to be a loogie, lefty one out guy, and through maybe 86, 87, and gets drafted by the Tigers. And I remember when he got drafted, the scout said to him, like, are you really going to take this opportunity? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you're graduating from a good college with a good degree. Maybe you go get a business job and you don't want to toil in the minors. And he was like, well, no, this is the dream. This is what I've been working my whole life for. And he was really set on making baseball work, even if it wasn't being professional, maybe becoming a coach or anything, to not have a desk job. But, through the course of his career, so he gets drafted by the Tigers, who are desperate for pitching. And the year they're calling everybody up, Tommy John, he's down. And it was an interesting situation because he actually got drafted in the, what's it called? The in-between round, where if you're AA, you get to,
the Rule 5.
Rule 5 draft. Yep. So he was picked up by the St. Louis Cardinals in the Rule 5 draft, which meant that he was at AA, and they would have to bump him to AAA and protect him there. And so that seemed like an investment, and they were going to then take on his surgery and his rehab. And they had a great medical program, maybe even compared to the Tigers, but they were pitching rich. And you could see it in slow motion where his opportunities were dwindling through externalities. Yeah. And I wonder, as you're drawing all these calculations and thinking through every possibility and potential outcome for yourself, how did you deal with injuries and setbacks and maybe some, things that were outside of your control? If you maybe break your back, and you can't play ball for a while, and you're thinking about, your arm only has so much matter to throw so many fastballs or curveballs.
Yeah.
How did you deal with it?
I would say that, I set out on a journey, and I wasn't going to let anything get in my way, to the point where when I was injured, and I did have Tommy John surgery when I was, in 22, my goal was to keep my body advancing, right? Can my legs get stronger? Can I learn how to run faster? Can my core get stronger? Because I can't obviously throw right now, but can I come back as a beast, And that was kind of my goal. I was never really that physical. I was pretty strong, in terms of like certain types of motions. Like I could do deadlifts and stuff like that. I could do like broad jumps. But after the back thing, my freshman year, I had a spondylolisthesis, which is like it means that your back is never really the same. It's kind of like wobbly after that it's almost like you just have like, I can stand still and go like, boop, and like pop my back just like this. Like that. And it's not really the best thing, I don't think. But the injuries came like step by step. So I had like a minor injury, then I had a more major, and then they kind of layered on top of each other. So by the time I actually had Tommy John surgery when I was 23 or 22, I was like, oh, it's fine. I'll just come back throwing harder. Like, it's great. And I've had this thing my whole life because I'm straight edge and I don't take pain medicine or anything like that because I'm a little bit weird. I recognize that that's a little bit weird, I should say. When I was a kid, I used to do the thing, like I used to love action movies. So there's like a scene in one of the Van Damme movies where he's like rubbing his shins with like the bamboo stick, to like deaden his nerves or whatever. And I used to do that because I used to be like, one day I'm gonna have to kick through a wall or whatever, like Tong Po. And so I guess I just developed like a high pain tolerance. And then as a result of that, when I had the elbow surgery, I didn't take any pain meds afterwards. So, I just would sit there and like that for, the first but it got me connected with my body. You know, it's like the first time that I really worked on the mind body connection in that regard. And so I tried to really understand how nutrition, vitamins, and all that stuff would help me heal. And as a result of that, I started getting really deep into, I don't know, meditation and just like understanding breathing control or mind control, really, you know, and trying to control my own mind. And I used to joke with people, I'd be like, yeah, this is like, I have to be a black belt at pitching if I'm going to make it. So this is kind of like my thing. I got to learn how to be like a Shaolin monk in order to do that. So I just really got into, you know, the mental side of the physical space, meaning like learning about nutrition, learning about muscularity, learning about stretching, learning about plyometrics, which is like the explosive training that you can do to kind of get your body going more. And then experimenting with myself. I was like, well, I know I'm going to miss a year. So like, what difference does it make? You know? So I'd like try to like go this way, go that way, like change my body composition a little bit, like really get leaner, get heavier. Like this, can I move better this way or that way? And I kind of reached an equilibrium at about 205 pounds. And that's sort of where I end up sitting for a little while until I had to go to the next level, which is about 215. And that's once I got to the point that I was, you know, 205, 210, 215, I came back and I was throwing 94 to 97 miles an hour. And before that, the fastest I had ever thrown was 93. I would like throw 90 to 92 and then like 93 once a game or twice a game or something like that. I could never really sustain it, you know? And then after that, I was like 93, 94, 95, 97, you know, and I could throw it harder and harder. And I started gaining velocity. But what happened was with my elbow, they took a bone chip out of my elbow the size of a grape. So I couldn't straighten my arm out. And then suddenly I could straighten my arm out. I was like, oh, y'all messed up now. Here I am. And so I felt like a superhero coming out of that. And I think a little bit as a result, I probably pushed it a little bit too far. But it really, really, really was like my body completely caught up with my mind. And it was like Dr. Strange, where I was like, oh, this is the mirror dimension. I could do anything. And I felt great afterwards, you know, but I was doing everything right. I ate super clean. I did all the weightlifting. I did all the stuff. I followed the program. I had a great surgeon. And then after that, I was just like, okay, well, how far can I go now that I have this awesome arm? And, you know, it all worked out really well. I sucked really bad my first year in the majors. But that was okay. It was just the typical thing that I had gone through where I got beat down, you know, hard, stood back up, beat down hard, stood back up, beat down hard. And then, you know, go think about it, go in the off season, go think about it. And then I thought about it and figured out all the things that I did wrong. And then how my approach was wrong. And then I came back the next year and had a pretty respectable season in 2006. And then a really good season in 2007, where I got a chance to be a closer after they traded Eric Gagne. And, you know, I got a chance to save 11 games in a row. So I saved 11 out of 11. And then they said, okay, that was a great August. Thanks, CJ. We're going to let Joaquin Benoit be the closer for September. And I was like, you guys are crazy. He doesn't want to be a closer. And they're like, no, it's okay. He throws really hard. He's got a good changeup. It's the thing. And then he was like, I don't want to be a closer. You're the closer. You like it. You like the stress situations. And I'm like, yeah, bring it on. You know what I mean? And I was just, that's how I was. And so then I was the setup guy and he went 5 for 11. And then the next year they made me the closer and in 2008, and everything was off to like a pretty good start until I had a bad game against the White Sox. Ozzie Guillen did a Santeria curse on me. And then my elbow failed again. And then I was pretty much done for the season at that point. And then I had to realize that I had to do some like, you know, anti-Bruja, you know, technology to avoid curses and whatnot, which is like a whole nother level. At least that's probably all in my head, but whatever.
Yeah. It's really interesting too. Like obviously you were a good hitter, it sounded like when you were young, and you could pitch. And then with pitching, you even have, you know, starting pitching or being a relief pitcher, or middle reliever or closer. There's a lot of different choices here. And I wonder, like, how did you kind of move more towards pitching than hitting as a professional? But I also am curious, like, was it hard for you? Like, maybe, I don't know if you wanted to maybe be a starter more than a pitcher. I think I've read interviews from back in the day where you would talk to the press about how you want to be a starter. And I remember your career, you know, kind of clearly. And you had a lot of success as a starter when you finally got those opportunities, and you got to
Yeah.
pitch in all-star games and playoff games and pitched really well. And then I think you had more injuries after that. And I wonder, how was that kind of mental? How did you deal with that? Like, I want to be a starter right now, but they're going to use me as a reliever.
Yeah, it's like it's the worst. Being a setup guy, being a really good setup guy is the worst job because you pitch down by one, you pitch down by two, you pitch up by four, and pretty much anything in between. And I was a good setup guy. I could come in the seventh inning, throw 2 innings if our team was losing or whatever on the road, and then get the finish. And then our closer was a little bit more, in 2009 when I got
K-Rod?
put back in. What's that?
Was it K-Rod?
No. It was Francisco.
Francisco Rodriguez.
No, Frankie Francisco. So
Frankie Francisco.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Frankie Francisco was kind of brittle. Like he couldn't throw 2 or 3 days in a row. So he'd be like, no, I have a little, like my shoulder bark a little bit. And he was super funny, but he would say stuff like that. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to be closer today. And so I had a couple like really interesting sort of Iron Man's type stats where I pitched twice in double headers a bunch of times. So I pitched the first and the second game of a doubleheader. And I'm like one of the few people that's ever won a game and had a save in the same day in 2 different games. Actually, that was like a stump the Schwab question at one point. So I had 2 saves in a day, a save and a win, things like that. I threw like 3 innings in like a doubleheader, like 1 1/3 and then another 1 2/3. I just got abused, but it was because I was effective and I had stuff that I could get righties out with and lefties. And I wasn't ever going to sit there and bitch about it and say, no, I don't want to do it. I'd be like, oh, you're going to let me close this game? Cool. I get the save. And, but I think if I would have been a starter in 2007, 2008, 2009, then my career would have had a little bit different trajectory because I would have gone into free agency after 2011. And I probably would have been more prepared for the playoffs in 2010 and 11 as well. Just having more innings under my belt, and having more chances to go and pitch when maybe I might not have had my best stuff. But, I really resented that for a while, not getting a chance to start when some of the guys that they were running out there to start. I was like, this guy, this guy really? And it sucks because, a lot of people on your team are nice and you feel bad. But when you see that, like as a scout, like you're looking at this guy and you're like, he's going to last 3 innings, give it 5 runs. We're going to lose today because he's not ready. And then, there it is. Where you always feel about yourself, you have to feel confident about yourself. But I would also see guys that didn't prepare. And that was the biggest thing. There's a lot of players that don't prepare. They don't read scouting reports. The coach hands them a piece of paper and says, okay, this is how you pitch to this guy. Check it out. And it'd be like, throw him down, like move him off the plate. He hates that. And then he'll chase sliders in the dirt. I'm like, that's it? Like, what's his batting average on 2-strike fastballs up and in? And they're like, huh? And, like they wouldn't know. Whereas I would do all these like forensic things. Like I'd have the 9 box and I'd have like pressure zones on top of the 9 box and below the 9 box to say like, okay, if there's 3 balls across or whatever, like which one of these is my safe spot? Where's my escape hatch? If I need a strike, where's he not going to hit a home run if I throw a ball here? And, memorizing those types of things and working on my memory to remember that stuff in the heat of battle. I would be like running, and it'd be 100 degrees outside in Texas. I'm wearing a hoodie and like running. And I'd be like, okay, Nick Swisher, got to throw him a curveball. Okay. And then I would like go back to running and I would keep the scouting reports with me so I could actually like have my heart rate elevated in the heat and feel all that stuff. And then still try to think my way through how I was going to pitch because that's what would happen in the game. If I just sat in the clubhouse, like, oh yeah, cool scouting report. And then like shit hits the fan and your heart rate's up and your adrenaline's up and like you don't remember any of that stuff. You have to train at that level and be aware at that level, and I think that was something that like the racing and stuff really helped with that because then I was doing all this stuff in the off season where I was riding motorcycles and racing and, all these things. And that really helped me manage stress because I was be very hard on myself or whatever. And I would stress out is like always the World Series. But what it comes down to is, you have a plan and then you have to constantly keep adjusting to stay ahead of the other people catching up to your plan. And, you have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, then they catch up to you really quick and they just like come out of the woods and just smash you, and then you're like, oh, damn, where's my wallet? Like I just got robbed.
Right.
And that's what it would feel like to be unprepared for me. I hated that feeling. So I was determined to be physically, mentally, and strategically prepared. And I think that was my biggest gift and biggest strength, was just that memory aspect and the creativity to say, oh, well, if this is really his weakness, I need to throw a pitch that looks like it's going to be that and then do this. So I'm like trying to create two situations off of one weakness somewhere in the strike zone. If he's got a hole up and in, I need to throw up and in, but further up and in. And then I need to be able to throw another curveball or something like that below that zone. And that type of thought process helped because of my background as a hitter. I knew how to hit and I knew how hard it was to hit. And I knew geometrically that a guy has a genetic weakness because he's built how he's built. So he has a genetic strength, a genetic weakness, a genetic vanilla sort of profile. And you have to figure out how to stay away from the A swing, which is the damage swing, and make him take off balance swings. Like, you're a baseball fan. Everybody's seen Derek Jeter smash like an up and away pitch to right center for a home run. And then they've also seen him get completely off balance and go like, oopsies, and like flick a ball and then hit a single. And if you're going to pitch to one of those two swings, like you pitch to the swing where he's going to flick a little single or maybe ground out. You don't pitch to the swing where he's going to drive the ball and hammer a home run to right field, So that strategically, you pitch to the small part of the bat. You want the guy like Mariano Rivera, you want him to like break the bat, you want to just try to break his bat. And if you can do that, then, you're going to have some pretty good success. And that's, simplifying it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed watching Derek Jeter play. I think just the way he carried himself, played the game, I think it was really setting an example for all. It's interesting, you bring up connections, and like, I love watching the ball game at home. And really since 9/11, I kind of gave up all sports except for baseball, just because I felt it was taking up too much time in my life, too much mind space. I was getting involved in narratives and soap operas that just didn't really impact my life. But I kept baseball as something to watch, just because for me, it's so low time preference. It's just such a slow game.
There's so many games too.
Yeah. And I love that about it. And I love the nuance of it. And I love that a game in July will, matter in when we get to September. But, in this current environment I'm almost feel less of a fan because I can't connect with the game. I love watching at home, but once in a while I like go to the stadium. But even when the stadiums are empty, it just doesn't feel like it's a real game to me.
Yeah, it's weird. It's quiet. You hear the dudes in the dugout chirping.
Yeah.
And it'll be like a guy hits a home run and you hear some guy go, damn, it's gone. And then that's it, and no fans, just the ball, boom, boom, boom.
Yep. But, when I do get together, even with friends and family, but more at the ballpark, like I hear a lot of sometimes what I think is stupid shit being heckled and yelled. And one of the things that, that really just kind of gets my gird a lot is when this notion that and it's usually about young ball players are just overpaid. And why do they deserve so much? And that's not even looking at what the owners make, how much we're paying to get into the stadium. But to me, it just misses like what you've been outlining for the first part of the show is just how much work went into getting here and to maximizing and getting the most out of this short period of time where you have an opportunity. But you are like watching like the best 500 people in the world. And it took all their work. I mean, maybe one or two of them are lucky enough, maybe Manny Ramirez, to get there with very little effort or something, or whatever it is. And I'm not saying Manny didn't put in the work. I'm just exaggerating.
Yeah, no,
but
there is a ton of work that goes into it, and there's a ton of baseball that goes into it. There's a ton of stuff that happens to put people in the seats, right? And put people in the position to play shortstop for the Yankees or, second base for the Mets or whatever, right? The Yankees, for instance, one year made like their local revenue, meaning ticket sales, jersey sales, and like the Yes Network would bring in like, let's call it $400 million a year, right? So if the payroll is $200 million, that's cool. Like, congrats, New York, you are profitable, like it's a business. And there's other teams that their local revenues will be like $65 million and their payroll will be like $40 million. And they're like profitable, you know what I mean? And that centralized revenue sharing model that happens in football, where it's like 80% of the revenue centralized versus baseball, where it's like 40% or 30% or something. It's a much different ratio. And that's why you see these teams have wildly different profitability and wildly different payroll, as well.
Yeah.
So it was, but like at the end of the day, like think about how many jobs, are created because people want to watch, like at his peak, Derek Jeter play a baseball game. 50,000 people show up to watch this guy. Like realistically, there's 50,000 people there. They know his name, they know his number, they know his stats, they know his hero moments. He was an economy by himself, right? In New York and nationwide. Like everybody knew who he was. It's the same thing with, Kobe Bryant when he played basketball, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, all these guys, right? So it's like, yeah, you know what? If there is this huge amount of commerce that's happening as a result of this guy showing up, and then like people go, and he's so good that it's TV, it's video, it's highlights, it's video games, it's Sprite, it's Nike, it's whatever. He's generating the revenue for everybody else too. It's not like he's the only person making the money. It's not an extraction economy.
Yeah. I would argue most ball players are underpaid, not overpaid.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm exaggerating there too.
But yeah. No. But I mean, think about it. Like a guy like LeBron James, right? Like perfect example.
Underpaid.
Yeah, like that dude's worth it. I mean, realistically,
$100 million a year.
Yeah, but that's why he has the Sprite deal, the Nike deal,
right.
Space Jam, like whatever else he's got, And so the hardest thing about being an athlete is it's really hard to be the best version of yourself as a player, but it's also super duper hard to have anybody care, number one, about you as a person. And number two, everyone's like, oh, well, why don't you have like this shoe deal, or why don't you have this, or whatever? It's like, because they don't care. Like people don't really care about the second best pitcher on an American League West team, compared to LeBron James. They don't really care about the best shortstop on the Kansas City Royals, you know what I mean? The year they win the World Series. Like how many people know who Alcides Escobar is, 5 years later from when he was Alcides Escobar, the World Series winning shortstop? Like 5 years later, that dude's off the face of the earth. Like no one knows who that guy is, right? Relatively speaking to a LeBron James or a Kobe or whatever, because of the fact that when you have five guys playing, on a 90-foot, long court like basketball, the cameras are so up in the guy's face and they're not wearing hats. It's just their face, So there's this bigger identification thing, and they make the game seem more special because there's less games. Scarcity.
Right. Talking about like kind of like that moment, or not one moment really, but like you achieve this goal where now you're a Major League Baseball player. And at some point you're an established player and you've earned your, maybe your first real contract. And I think there's two sides to that coin. One, I wonder, like, what is that moment like, that sort of that dream come true of all that work put in? Is it something that like is noticed, or is it like at that point that's what you've earned and that's your life now and that's your reference points? And then the other side of that is, how is it being a public figure and having everyone know what you make and talk to you, whether you know them about it or maybe say things to you, and you have to then either think about that or respond or not. And what's it like to play, professionally through pain? Like my job, like no one asks me to play, work through pain to get paid, and then in public and have people comment on it. And it's all high time preference from the fans to the media. Like you're saying, Mariano Rivera blows a save in April, and there's people calling for his head and his job.
Yeah. And it's like, this guy has 600 saves. Chill the F out. Sit down in your seat, pal. Like that's Mariano Rivera. He's a saint.
Yeah.
I think that's a really kind of multi-part question. So let me meander a little bit. Playing through pain is part of sports. That's it. You take that money and that's your hush money. You're supposed to shut up about it. You're not supposed to talk about it. The doctors, the team doctors and stuff like that, if they have your best interest, are giving you a pretty good amount of, anti-inflammatory medicine or massage or some sort of, mitigation therapy is what I would call it. I was one of the first baseball players to do like the blood treatments, like the PRPs and the stem cells and all that stuff, to try to repair torn cartilage, to try to repair torn tendons and things like that. I had God, 30 PRP injections maybe over the years, maybe 50. I don't know, a lot. I had like 2 or 3 in my ankle when I tore my Achilles a little bit. I had hamstring, I had groin, I had tons of arm, stuff, shoulder a couple times, elbow a couple times. But I wouldn't take pain medication, right? So that was the thing. Like I wouldn't take pain meds, like what's the post-surgery stuff is oxycodone or whatever. Like I would never take that because I knew it was like a drug. I mean, I knew it was like habit forming and stuff like that. So anything gnarlier than like a Tylenol or an Advil, I didn't want to do it at all, and that created some stress, with the team because they were like, oh, why don't we just give you some cortisone and give you some of this? And I'm like, yeah, because cortisone actually makes your joints brittle. So then whatever friction and problems you have, it just gets worse. Like, so I'm not really helping myself out there. Like it's actually going to make it worse like 6 weeks from now. So I got really educated on that because I had all these injuries. And that is ultimately what really ended my effectiveness as a baseball player was, the playing through pain to the point that things just started breaking, you can bend and stress and get sore, and that's one thing, but then you just keep going out of like this weird, like, oh, I'm going to be like a Navy SEAL and I'm going to show everybody. Nobody gives a shit. Like nobody cares. Like it's all about how well you perform. And I think there's guys over the years that probably extended their career by 2 or 3 years by like maybe not taking the ball when they didn't feel 100%. You know what I mean? And in baseball, you can kind of get away with that because there's so many games. You're like, oh, well, we'll just get them tomorrow. Like, give me like 3 days off and I'll go. I never did that. Like when I was a starter, even when I was a reliever, I took the ball every time they handed me the ball, and I never asked for a day off. And that ego thing to say that, is that on my baseball card? No. Is that statistically like, does that even matter? No, it doesn't matter at all. But and so realistically, how much money did I cost myself by being a tough guy? Probably a lot. So live and learn. So then, in regards to being a known entity, how I would say it, it's cool. It's like really cool. You get to go places, you get to do things. I remember I did like a couple red carpet events. I got to have this like quasi Hollywood lifestyle every once in a while where I would get to go to events and go to the ESPYs. Like I went to the ESPYs, I went to like the ESPN, the Body Issue launch party. I got to go to, like Fan Cave and do stuff with MLB TV, before it was really a thing. I did like podcasts and, I did interviews and I was on TV shows. I got to do the Mindy Project, which is probably like the highlight for me in a lot of ways is I got to hit, Mindy with a cupcake in a cupcake wedding scene, a fight scene, where it was a food fight. And they're like, and I had just had knee surgery, and they're like, hey, how well can you throw? I'm like, I can stand on one leg, and like if it's like the size is there, if it's not too light, and I was like picking it up, and they're like, throw it over there, let me see it, and I'm like, shoot, and then like I dotted something, and they're like, okay, don't hit her in the face, and I was like, okay. And I'm like, they're like, hit her in the neck or like, anywhere here, but like, we don't have to redo her makeup if you like smash her in the face with the cupcake. So it was kind of funny, but and stuff like that, like you can't ever get that experience again. And I embraced that because I felt like, hey, I'm articulate this is like this, I'm in LA, like, let's do it. And I always looked at it as a way to be a little bit more relevant off the field because I knew after having surgeries and stuff, I would eventually stop playing baseball. I either wanted to do film and TV stuff and be a writer, or I wanted to, race and all that stuff. And that was going to be something where I needed to have relevance in front of the camera and be a personality or get sponsorship or whatever. So I always just embraced that aspect of it. What's weird is when reporters start asking you about your dating life. That's when it gets really weird. And Evan Grant from like, I don't know what newspaper he was with, but he was like the nemesis guy. He was the local guy that I hated when I was in Texas, and he hated me, and he just always did shit to like say bad things about me. Like, oh, Wilson, like dances over the alligator pit again or something like that. And I was like, dude, it was a 1-2-3 inning. Like, what are you talking about? Just stuff like that, so there was things that happened, but I think like once you become an established player and you can kind of throw your weight around a little bit, then you can do things to help improve the team, because you can say, hey, listen, this lunchroom condition is garbage. Like, we need to get real food in here. Like, why, our weight room sucks. Like, we need this. And the Angels were really weird about that. I got there and I was like, oh, the Angels, big team, like all the money in the world. And I get there and they sign me, they sign Albert Pujols. First spring training, I show up and I'm like, where's the weight room? Like, where is it? You know, they're like, what do you mean? That's the weight room. I'm like, dude, that's like 10 feet by 10 feet with like some dumbbells and a pulley machine. Like, where's the weight room?
Right.
Like, I want to squat. I want to like do box jumps. Like, where's that shit? You know what I mean? Like, we're going to do cleans. They're like, oh, you do cleans? Oh my, you do powerlifting? Ooh, you know? And I was like, that's why you guys aren't good anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And it was like, it was weird. There was this culture of like laziness and partying that was really endemic on the team when I got there. And I think they started to kind of transition it a little bit as I got through it, because I was like, hey, if you guys want to beat the Rangers, they're super physical, man. They work out a lot. And, you know, and the A's are like hooligans. Like, they're trying to they're trying to fight people. Like, they're like gangsters. Like, you can't just go out there and be like, oh, I golfed at Pelican Hill today. And you can't expect to like win a baseball game because you golfed at Pelican Hill. This shit doesn't mean anything, you know? So there was like this kind of like frat guy, like, you know, Bradley Cooper from Wedding Crashers culture with the Angels when I got there. And I hated it. I hated that aspect of it. I was really disappointed. But like the team, this is really funny. They didn't want to have weight room. They didn't want to have TVs in the weight rooms in the stadium because the owner didn't want to have the guys just hanging out there all day working out. I'm like, oh, so you want them to sit in the clubhouse and play cards all day?
And eat
like,
food.
Great. Yeah, you're going to get a bunch of fat, lazy guys. Like, what you don't win any games like that.
Was that Artie Moreno?
Artie, yeah. Artie Steele.
Yeah.
And Sosha was not a physical specimen. He wasn't somebody that worked out. You know, he was like, oh, you know, you can play baseball really hard and that'll keep you in good shape. I was like, what shape is that exactly? Like, what shape? It's not a good shape.
Right.
You know? So it was just weird. But the Rangers were a really well-run organization. You know, for the majority of the time I was there, they had really good commitments to the physical side. The medical team was really good. The Angels tried to get really weird with stuff. And so I'd have to throw my weight around. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to this guy as a doctor. Like, this guy sucks. I'm going to this guy. He's good. I'm going to go to the Curl and Job clinic and see Lou Yoakum or Steve Yoon. Those guys are legit, or Neil Elitrash. I'm not going to go to these trash pandas that are down the street, you know, because the coach can tell them, you know, like Bud Kilmer Varsity Blues style, like, you know, oh, just shoot him up with some morphine. He'll be fine. Because that's the kind of shit that they would try to get us to do. You know, I was like, that's stupid. Like, that's not going to work, you know? So, you know, it is what it is. I could have made more of a stink about it publicly at the time, but I think ultimately, like, I tried to help as many of the younger players to, you know, do their best and get the most out of their careers. And I think I had probably more of an impact in Texas in that regard than I did in Anaheim, but mostly because there was so much resistance since I was like the new guy, and the established pitcher when I got there was someone that didn't believe in working out, didn't believe in sleeping, didn't believe in studying, didn't believe in much of anything. And it made the culture of the team really rough, because then it was me and him butting heads for like 4 years, you know?
Right.
That's what ultimately led to me like retiring, because he signed with a team that particular guy signed with a team that was recruiting me in 2017, because I missed all of 2016 and I was going to pitch in 2017. And then they signed him and I was like, I'm just, you know what? I have principles. I made some money playing baseball. I'm out. And I just was like, I'm going to go race cars and be a car dealer. And that was it. And then in February 2017, I became the car dealer up here. And then I just started selling Porsches and racing cars and all that stuff. And, you know, I often think that I might have made the wrong decision about two things in my life. Number one, not just taking the biggest contract offer I got when I was a free agent. I always think about that, because I always wonder what if would have happened, because, you know, it could have been different somehow, even though the team that I was going to sign with like blew itself up and got all weird afterwards. But I would say that, you know, I think about that a lot. And
I lost, you got muted.
or something like that. If I would have been able to go back and and do that. I also think about what would have happened, what would my life have been like if I hadn't done the car dealership thing, because this has been such a big anchor for me for the last 8 years, in like terms of like knowing what I want to do, knowing what's happening in my life on a daily basis. So there's a lot of those types of things that have popped up over the years, but ultimately, I think I'm extremely grateful for the success that I had and the teammates that I had that helped me, and the teammates that I shared those moments with, and being able to pitch in the World Series and win championships and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it's a very rare thing in a sport like that to be able to win the American League a couple times in a row.
Yeah, wild. What do you think of steroids and performance enhancing drugs? Is it less prevalent in the game? Can they ever keep it out of the game?
We got to ask your boy Robinson Cano about that one. He just got popped again,
Yeah.
Sadly. I'm very disappointed in him. I have to single him out as somebody that I'm super disappointed in. Getting to this stage in his career, I played against him every year. 05, we were rookies, played against him every year. He's a fantastic competitor. I loved facing him. He ate my lunch for a couple of years. I mean, he hit like 380 off me for a while. And then I kind of figured out how to pitch to him for a little bit. And then, then it just kind of dematerialized or whatever. And I don't know, like, I think that there's always going to be the incentive for people to be a better player. And if people want to take that from a medical standpoint and do the wrong thing, then I think that's going to be a deal. But, like, you're talking to a guy that's like literally never drank a beer before. So it's ethically hard for me to like relate to being in a position, because I lost games to people that I knew juiced, you know what I mean?
Yep, I
Looking
know.
back on it, right? Looking
Yep.
back on the home runs that I gave up to people, or, tough at bats against guys or whatever. And it was like, when I first got called up, it was a huge part of the game, a really big part of the game. Like my first spring training was 2002. Juan Gonzalez, Pudge Rodriguez, A-Rod, like John Rocker. Like, I get to spring training,
Right.
Rafael Palmeiro. These guys were all on the same team. And I was like,
Right.
oh, these guys are animals. These are monsters. Ruben Sierra, that dude looked like he was carved out of granite. I was like, is that how big I have to be to play Major League Baseball? This is wild,
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I mean, I think there's the guys like Clemens and Bonds and this whole thing, McGuire, and like keeping them out of the Hall of Fame or whatever. It's been so long now, I mean, like, when was Barry's last season? Like 2005, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard for me to even think right now how hypocritical some of the elements of this are, because it's like most of the league had the opportunity to do it and get away with it. And a lot of them didn't, but a lot of them did. And, a lot of guys didn't get caught and got away with it. And they were seen as having clean careers, but the players know. The players know who juiced and who was dirty and all that stuff. So that's what sucks, but it's going to keep Manny Ramirez out of the Hall of Fame and a lot of these other guys, for stuff that they did towards the end of their career.
Yeah. Personally and ethically, I could never do it. I would always want to see what I was made of and what I could get out of myself. And I also think I have too low time preference for my own future self. And I'd worry about what that stuff would do to my body.
Oh, absolutely.
I wouldn't want to mess with that. But, from a macro sense, I mean, I remember watching 1998, that home run race was mesmerizing, McGuire and Sosa. But it was so obvious that they were juicing. And even McGuire was pulling out the Andro out of his, the creatine out of his locker to be a red herring. It was just so obvious. I'd seen pictures of him when he was a rookie. He was a beanstalk. And my own experience in high school, steroids were rampant, both for athletes and just, kids who wanted to maybe get girls and get bigger or something, and even in college, it was kind of more even very cosmetic. And a lot of dudes were doing it. And it just, I couldn't imagine that someone like A-Rod wasn't doing steroids from day one. And that that's what I believe.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Westminster Christian High School, sophomore year of high school, that dude has been juicing since.
I agree. And I think a lot of them were, just to generalize. But the one moment that I really appreciated was when Barry Bonds did them. Because, you had McGuire and Sosa, who were kind of like these boppers who you would talk about, I think, on Clubhouse. It's like those guys were kind of, maybe not those two in particular, but these big boppers were kind of sometimes easier to get out. You could just kind of find their weak spots, their soft spots, and you just have to make mistakes. But like, I really wanted to see the best ever on this science, because I wanted to see him do it got to a point where in 03, 04, he was getting 3 pitches a week and hitting 2 of them for home runs.
Yeah.
And it was just wild how locked in he was. And it was like Frankenstein. It was otherworldly. And it was like, all right, dude, if we're going to be watching this, like, I want to see it from the one guy who can take it to the next level.
It's like if you're going to see a cheat code, what is the real? You know, I've heard this argument from some people. They're like, "Nah, fuck it, let everybody juice and just see how gnarly they can do it." And I'm like, that's like not really sending the best message to the children, right? Say like, hey, once you get to this level, no rules. It's like, all right, dude, it's not like Love Island on BBC, right? So you have to figure out a way to, I guess, like optimize yourself, which for me was nutrition. And then I would always read journals and stuff like that. And it would be like, oh, if you do this, if you get on a bicycle and you ride really hard for 30 seconds and then you go slow for 30 seconds and really hard, you do that for 15 minutes, it makes your HGH go up. I'm like, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you eat a bunch of meat, your creatinine will go up and, you know, you'll get buffer. I'm like, I'm doing it. So I would do stuff like I went on an all red meat diet for 28 days, like literally red meat at every meal. Red meat, beef. And I would eat like one egg and then like one avocado and then like 1 cup of black beans and then like 1 cup of like Brazil nuts or something like that. And that was all I would eat the whole day. So for 28 days, all I did was like this gnarly keto thing. And I was like, oh my God, I can lift everything. And I felt great. And that's when I realized I had some dietary issues with different foods, like food allergies. And then once I eliminated those things from my diet, then it was like, you know, I got even better. But I was like, man, if I feel this good on food, I bet gear is just like the best thing ever. You know, I'm sure it is. But, you know, like you said, ethically, it's just something that I never really wanted to do and understood that people were doing it. But I would rather lose. You know, I just was like, well, I'd rather lose than like, you know, be able to look my wife in the eye and say, you aren't going to have any 3-eyed kids. You know what I mean? And that's a good deal. Like that's a pretty good deal. So, you know, I would think about stuff like that. And I would worry about stuff like that because I feel like at the end of the day, your stats don't really matter unless you're a Hall of Fame player, which I was not, you know, clearly not a Hall of Fame player. You know, no one's going to argue over my stats and say, oh, I was this, that, the other. What I am happy about is that my career ERA is like the same as Tim Lincecum's, right? Because he has like this reputation as like being the stud. And I'm like, my ERA was the same as his. And I played in the American League, the American League West the whole freaking time in Texas, you know, like so many of my games were in Texas. And, you know, so I think about stuff like that. A lot of were in Seattle too. So, you know, that's a pitcher's park. I have to like throw that in there. You have to be fair. Yeah, you know, I think like there's an honesty to failure and there's an honesty to losing. And I had already been through that so many times with my injuries, you know, knee problem, back problem, elbow problem, shoulder problem, nerve damage. It's like, you know, whatever, man, like I'm not perfect. I know it. I'm not superhuman. I know that too. I have a limit and, you know, I want to get right up to the limit and then hold it there as long as I can. And, but you know, I did everything workout wise I could do. I did stuff to push myself mentally. And I think that's what kept me effective as a baseball player, you know, for a really long time. You know, I pitched until I was like 35.5 years old. And that's pretty good. I probably, you know, if I didn't have the elbow problems from throwing too much when I was a kid, I probably would still be pitching because I think physically right now as a 40-year-old, I'm still very physically fit. I still have like everything still works. A lot of, you know, like everything's still kind of good. And I did think about it for a while after like I sat out 2017 and in 2018, I was like, maybe this car dealership thing was a mistake. Maybe I should just go back and play baseball. But I got so wrapped up in like parenting and all this other stuff that I actually kind of was like, I talked to my agent. I was like, maybe I could do a tryout. Maybe I could go back and like, you know, play again. And I was like, it's easy money. Like I just show up and like pitch and like someone's going to pay me like $4 million or something like that. Like that shit's cool. But you know, I think I had so much fun playing and getting the most out of myself. And I don't think there was much left for me in terms of like epic performances. I think all of those, you know, I left all those on the field, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think like players today are better than, you know, players of yesteryear? I mean, was Barry Bonds better than Mickey Mantle? And just on average, is, you know, the average player getting better and better throughout the league compared to, you know, prior generations?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you can even argue that. I think the physicality of the players and the science of the players and the science of the bats and everything like that, it's, you know, you could put Pedro Martinez against pretty much anybody and he'd thrash him. Sandy Koufax, put him in any era, dominant.
Right.
Kershaw, Pete Kershaw, anytime, you know? Yeah. But if you would have put like, I mean, if you put Ted Williams in today's era, right? He's basically like a cross between Bellinger from the Dodgers and God, who else would it be? And like Stanton, maybe, I don't know, in the sense that like he was so like an outcome guy, you know, he was like a really gnarly pull hitter, you know, and he hit a lot of home runs. He wasn't really that great on defense, you know what I mean? But he had a gorgeous swing, great strike zone discipline, high OPS. He would have really excelled in today's game, you know, getting the coaching and all that stuff because he had power. And you know, he's skinny, but he had power. So it's like, what are you going to do? Right. He doesn't have to like buff up or whatever. But I think maybe with some more physicality, he could have been even better. And you know, but at the same time, you have guys like Griffey who literally did not lift weights. And if Griffey would have lifted weights, who knows? He could have hit 900 home runs or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you have all these what ifs with baseball, and that's what makes it good. Baseball is good because of the what if thing, because the game has not changed. It's 90 feet to first base. It's 60 feet, 6 inches to the mound. It's roughly 330 feet at the short porch, and it's roughly 400 feet, you know, the long part. It's kind of the same game it was 100 years ago, right? It's not the same game it was 160 years ago, you know what I mean? But the dimensions of the field are very similar. And as a result of that and human evolution, we have this sort of like, you know, scientific approach to it that makes guys like, you know, what if they would have fixed Koufax's elbow? Can you imagine that? If he would have had Tommy John, they would have fixed his elbow.
Right.
And then the world would have got 6 or 7 more years of peak Sandy Koufax.
Right.
I mean, what if, right?
Yeah.
So I love that aspect of baseball because you can legitimately argue that. You know, you can make a legitimate argument and you can take a position on Mickey Mantle versus Barry Bonds, Mickey Mantle versus Mike Trout. You can make a legit argument, you know?
Right.
But really the thing is that I think about is the baseball players now are just so much faster. The speed is so much faster, and the throwing ability and the pitching ability. The average pitcher now is way, way, way nastier than the average 1970s pitcher.
Right.
I mean, realistically, the pitching is gnarlier.
You mentioned Koufax twice. My great uncle grew up to play pro football. And he was a Pro Bowl football player, played in Alabama under Bear Bryant. But growing up, his best friend was Sandy Koufax, and his other best friend was Fred Wilpon. And they would just play a lot of basketball together down in Coney Island. I'm kind of curious, CJ, aka Race Dog, describe your love for cars.
Yeah, you know, I fell in love with cars when I was a kid, 3 years old, 4 years old. You know, I really like cars. I thought it was really interesting that my doctor, you know, I gave my doctor a hard time for not driving a cooler car. And like I used to read like Road and Track magazine. I'm like, man, you're a doctor, you're a baller. You should drive like a Porsche or something like that. He's like, yeah, I drive like a Honda or something. And I didn't really understand that being frugal was like actually a good thing. So I didn't really connect with it, you know. But I feel like the car thing for me was a symbol of success. It was a symbol of, hey, you made it. It's a symbol of rewarding yourself. And I think for me, it was a transformative thing. Like I felt like if I was to get the cool car, that meant that I got where I wanted to get to. And I always had that as a goal, was to get cool cars. Always was about the cool cars when I was a kid. And it really drove my success in a lot of ways for baseball. Cause I was like, this is really the thing that I can do, an actual job that I can do and reward myself with a really awesome car. And, you know, did some go-karting, went to a lot of races, watched racing on TV. It was just the thing that I just loved it. It's just something I connected with the danger. You know, I connected with the control and all the different like emotions on display. And I think the risk, I understand the sort of risk reward hero thing. And I get very connected to that, you know, in a lot of ways. As a driver, I think the most impressive thing is when you're in a position where you're mastering your fear, you're mastering yourself, and you're becoming better, because you can manifest it and you can have it, you know, leak out of you, and you can see half a second of improvement, 0.2 of a second improvement. You can say, okay, I'm going to try this, and then it works, and then you're like, oh my God, I did it. And then you know, you reincorporate that new thing. And when you're racing, it's like this awesome song that's stuck in your head, because you're going around the track, you know, and the turns are the same every time, right? You're going up and down and left and right, going up the gears, down the gears. And it's like trying to write a song. You're trying to get to that point where the car does a little bit of this and it does a little bit of that, and you go a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, and you enjoy this dynamic dance with the car. It's like a roller coaster, but you're steering it. And I don't really experience a lot of other stuff like that. Surfing's like that, skiing's like that, but like running a race is not like that, meaning like you're physically running a race. Like that's not that fun. It gets really into the psychology of it, which is what I like a lot. And it gets back to like that pain tolerance, that willingness to push to the edge.
Right. And I'm sure there's some adrenaline junkie aspect to it as well.
Substitute. Yeah. I have to substitute the adrenaline for all the stuff that, I would normally be doing as a person of that age, whatever age that was. But now that I'm an adult, like I said this to somebody, and I don't know if it really made sense to them, but it really made sense to me at the time. I knew I was going to need another arm surgery if I kept pitching. At some point, I'm going to pitch, do the same shit I've been doing for 10 years, pitch through the pain, and then eventually break off some bone chips and, shred some other stuff. And I got to take all that stuff out. I was willing to risk my entire body and my entire life in order to race, but I wasn't willing to deal with the certainty of another surgery and another rehab stint and all that stuff. So when I did stuff like I got to race at Spa in Belgium, I got to race Pikes Peak, which is stupid. I mean, like really dangerous, but bucket list. Hey, you know what I mean? And I started saying yes to more things like that as a result of just wanting to live my life. And I guess it's just, adrenaline junkie, whatever you want to call it. But experience junkie, I wanted to do all this stuff, shark diving, cliff jumping. I wanted to conquer that fear within me, to the point that if I had to be a hero in a situation, I'd be like, I'm done shark diving, cliff jumping, whatever, bro, let's do this, and I wanted to sort of advance myself in that regard.
Yeah. I've also heard you mention that, we're all on a journey in life and we got to make it through the desert to get to the oasis. And so I'm wondering, you might be at an oasis now, but is there another metaphorical oasis that you're trying to get to? And,
absolutely.
Yeah. And what is that for you? And maybe what are your reference points at this level of success in your life, to try to get yourself grounded or know who to compare yourself to now in this next phase so that you can extrapolate and do all the calculations on them to get to where you want to be?
Yeah, that's really hard, right? Because when I was a pitcher, I had guys like Sabathia or David Price or, John Lester or whatever that I was trying to outperform statistically, right? I knew that I could never catch Kershaw. He was just too far out, in a lot of ways. But physically, I was like, okay, well, Sabathia is a big guy, but like, what's his real, like, how many guys is he really striking out? Like, what's his ERA really like? Stuff like that. What's his, what are his stats like, and how many home runs has he given up? I can kind of compare myself to those things. As a dealer, it's ultimate competition. I'm competing against every Porsche dealer, every BMW dealer, every Audi dealer in the country every day. We sold 3 cars in the Audi Porsche side today. I just had to check that really quick. I was like, okay, cool. Three's a good number. That's good. It's a good pace. We're halfway through the month right now. So I'm like trying to encourage our guys to get going. And then, as a person, right, I think like I'm looking to references like some of my friends that are unbelievable parents, great husbands, and thinking, okay, I need to have a life like his life. I need to be at that level that he's at, where, maybe his kids are a little bit older, but I've seen him go through these things where, where he is at right now, is where I want to get to when I'm his age. I have a couple people like that. I have another couple people that, I would say that I would want to model my investing success after, maybe, and that's another angle, to say that, hey, I want to kind of innovate. I want to do some stuff that's like where people don't think I can do it. I want to, add myself to this roster and put myself in this category, or put myself in this, like, in this company of people. And I think that's really where, tying it into like Bitcoin and stuff, I think that's really where, I feel like I've taken to it really quickly, like a duck. And, it's it makes a lot more sense for me now, having done all the other stuff that I've done, having, invested in some of the other stuff. Cause I really like, I didn't come from some sort of like wealthy family or whatever, but knowing that I can maybe leave generational wealth behind and give my kids a chance at a life that I didn't have. And what I mean by that is a life that can start with a certain level. So that way, when you do level up, it goes towards like making a real difference in the world. Because I don't think really what anything I did was really that special I mean, it was rare, but it's not really that amazing. I didn't cure cancer or anything like that. Like, yeah, I threw a couple complete games or like pitched in the World Series or whatever. But it's not like, I guess in a way, I sort of worked my way to that point. I didn't come up with any great discovery yet, right? I still believe that my greatest days are ahead of me, that my greatest innovations or my greatest sports success is going to be through racing. My goal is to like win Le Mans one day. So if I do that, then I'm like better than Patrick Dempsey, who's like the de facto like celebrity racer guy. I want to be like a better racer than Paul Newman or something like that. You know what I mean? I have to categorize myself like a secondary guy in that regard. But as a dealer, I'm not I will never get to the Roger Penske situation because I just don't desire that anymore. I thought that that's something I would want, but once I got deeper into the business, I said, okay, well, this is kind of like an equilibrium that I'm okay with. I just need to maximize what I have here in Fresno. And then, from there, I would rather do other stuff outside the car business. I'd rather get into farming. I'd rather get into technology. I'd rather try to, use all my brain power to the fullest, which I think is going to be outside of the auto industry, realistically.
Yeah. It seems like, you're incredibly laser focused, grounded, driven. And I wonder, like, where did you kind of come to Bitcoin? And what kind of role does Bitcoin play in your life now? It seems like, I mean, I've heard you on Clubhouse. You seem to really get it. You seem to speak well on it. You seem to, I was in a room with you on Clubhouse and someone kind of brought up almost like a point that wasn't really related to the conversation. And I was really amazed with how you emphasized with the person, connected with them, and kind of walked through your take on what they were kind of getting at. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what role Bitcoin plays in your life now, and how do you see, like, is Bitcoin something you're going to teach your kids about? I'm just kind of curious your take on.
I think I started the way a lot of people do, which is as a skeptic, thinking that because of the way I was hearing about it, it was because of stuff like Silk Road and things like that. So as somebody that doesn't do drugs and doesn't drink and doesn't like espouse that stuff, I'd be like, oh man, this is like evil internet money. And then it was like magic internet money. And I'm like, okay, I don't believe in magic, like whatever. And then it was like, the market goes up, the market crashes. And then after the market crashed, I was like kind of surprised that it didn't go to zero, because I was so far outside of the knowledge base at that point that I was like, oh, if something goes from 1,000 to 20,000 and it crashes, if it's a scam, like some people say, it's going to go to zero. And it didn't. And I was like, all right, well, that's kind of weird. And it traded sideways for quite some time. And then it kind of, had this sort of like 3,000, 6,000 sort of trading range or whatever. And that's when I got back into it. Like, I was like, okay, let me do some more research on this. Let me check it out. And that's when I really got, I just would say, like, super interested. And I think I got interested in it from a standpoint of the fact that I'm an insomniac and I really like stuff that happens at 2 a.m. And when it's just happening, I could just sit there and watch it like the Matrix and be like, like, oh, there's all these transactions happening. Oh my gosh, like, look at this. And I was very, very interested in why things were the way they were. I had no idea. I started doing my own research. I didn't have any real like crypto Twitter people. I didn't have any Bitcoin Facebook people. I didn't have any, like, I wasn't buddies with like a guru or anything like that from the start. I had met some people that told me that they were like really into it and stuff like that. And, I kind of like tried to dabble in it with like one of these guys that was a guru or whatever. He ended up being a con artist and like, ripping me off. And that was kind of shitty. But then I was like, wait a second. I you know what? I broke my back when I was 18. Like, so yeah, this guy ripped me off. Like, whatever. I'm going to figure out a way to do it. So then I learned how to trade. I just taught myself how to trade because I used to day trade when I was a kid. And, I just fell in love with the fact that it was there. And then the more I got into it, it became less about the money side of it, meaning the fiat side of it, and more about the Bitcoin and the freedom and the, stand on your own and the libertarianism and all that stuff. And that's kind of where I'm at now. But I would say that, like, as a observational listener and as a like spatial logic, brain, that's like my skill. I would guess if everybody has like a sort of learning style, I can take something and I can render it in my head and think like, oh, okay, well, this is what the label looks like if I flip it around. This is, does that make sense? Like I can put the Legos together in my head. And so as I start to put things together and come up with a framework, it allows me to like verbally, come up with analogies and metaphors for people that are a lot more understanding, than someone says UTXO. Like if someone says UTXO, if you don't know what that means, or UASF or whatever, like if you're a newbie and someone says that like in passing, like it goes by, you're like, what just happened? Like, what are those phrases? I need to know. And, so I just am a serial researcher. I just love sitting on a computer and just reading and digging and reading and digging through FUD and digging through bad articles and digging through like slanted articles and things like that. And, I started going to conferences. So I would go to like the blockchain conferences and the Bitcoin conferences and stuff like that. I, saw people like Tim Draper speak. And Tim Draper said something at the LA Blockchain Expo in 2019. And I just kept looking at his eyebrows, going like, dude, what are we doing with those eyebrows? What are we doing? But he said, in the future, governments will compete for citizens. Governments will compete for citizens who they will want the best citizens in their jurisdiction. And Bitcoin and the Bitcoin economy are a way of, a methodology of basically attracting these types of people. He said, just you wait, and I wrote it down. I was like, yeah, yes, absolutely. Right. Because I saw how like, Silicon Valley attracts a certain type of person, or New York attracts a certain type of person, or whatever. Hollywood attracts a certain type of person. So it made sense to me that like, if we didn't need to live anywhere anymore because we were working from home, or we were, working in a virtual space, or, we didn't, and this is like I said, this is like 2019. I was like, this is a genius thing. And I started coming up with this concept of the future of work in my head. And I just kept thinking about how like so many people work in offices and there's like call centers and stuff like that. I was like, well, why do we need call centers? You could work from home and you could have a server that pings you in. It's like, pick up the phone and like, people could get way more of a fair wage in Bitcoin than they can in their shitty fiat currency in whatever third world country they are in. Like realistically, I'd played with a lot of people from Venezuela, from the Dominican Republic. I had seen in Mexico, I'd seen terrible like financial situations spring forth into these people, knowing that they either had to make it as a baseball player or they had to learn how to sell drugs, because there's really only two opportunities if you want to take care of your family in some of these places. So I saw the desperation, from some of these third world teammates in terms of how bad they wanted to make it. And as a result of that, how hard they were willing to go, and how far they were willing to push themselves. And I was like, oh, Bitcoin actually kind of fixes that if we adapt like a sort of GED equivalent skill set, for the new internet and the new internet economy. And so I started thinking about it like in this really big, like huge sense of like energy and like solar power and like wind power. I mean, the gas powered mining and stuff like that. Like I hadn't really heard about that until maybe like 6 months ago. But before that, I was thinking about like wind power, solar power, Bitcoin, trash. Like, I'm in Fresno, there's a lot of farmers. So I was invested in like this bug company that was taking the bugs that would like eat the biological trash from the organic farms. And then you could feed those bugs to chickens or pigs or fish or whatever. And you could take the soil that they made and you could plant again. And so I was like going to conferences for like agriculture. And this is all just like spare time stuff, because I love that moonshot type vibe, that you have when you're like in the VC startup kind of thing. So I think that sort of was the way I got into it. I didn't go to Stanford. I didn't go to USC. I didn't come from this like super networking kind of thing on the West Coast where everybody that like, their dad's got a company. I didn't grow up with anybody like that, So I in a way I saw Bitcoin as a way to do that on my own. Despite the fact that I was already doing the car dealership thing, I was like, okay, well, if I can get the car dealership to like work itself, then I can take my brain power, my effort level, and put it into something like Bitcoin. And I was just a fiend for trading. And then I got to the point where, I was trading like all these shit coins and all this other stuff. And I was like, this is like a waste of effort. I'm working my ass off. So what, I can make an extra $1,000 a week trading? This is stupid. I need to go big, or I need to like just compile. And then I switched over to the compiler mindset where I just wanted to sort of rack up, Satoshis, and then quality of life improves, everything like that went better. So for like, I would say the last maybe 13 or 14 months, it's been more about accumulating Bitcoin as opposed to trading between all the other crap that's happening,
Yeah.
and orange pilling the hell out of a lot of people. Like I've got probably 40 employees here at the store that are Bitcoiners now. And it's awesome because some of them were buying in when it was like 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. And they're like, they're like this, because these are people that aren't making a lot of times 6 figures. And so for them to make 5 figures, in a short span of time, and giving them the sort of resources, but like, it's great. Honestly, like Clubhouse has sort of been like when I came back from Tommy John surgery, I've got the blockages out of the way. I've got all the bad stuff out of the way. Now I can hit full velocity, and there's people there that I can share with, and the people there that I can, do something with. So I think I have a little bit of a gift for the analogy space and metaphors and a little bit of comedy. So it helps me, when I'm talking to people, because I can try to break it down a little bit. But I would really love to do some media stuff around, Bitcoin, sort of normalizing some of the aspects of it, because I feel like there's still this idea that there's this guy eating Cheetos in his basement that's a billionaire, and he's just like waiting to dump his bags on us at some point. And people are like that, like the no coiners are worried about that guy. That's the guy they're worried about, And I'm like, dude, if enough people buy Bitcoin, everybody gets an F-16. We can live in a citadel. It'll be awesome, And like, I'm thinking more like that, like idealistically. But I think everybody has their things. But my daughter is 5, and I introduce her to people. And if I know that person's into Bitcoin, I'm like, see, this is Daddy's friend Sebastian. He also trades Bitcoin. And she'll be like, oh, you like Bitcoin too? And he'll be like, yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. I think it's great. So I think it's, part of the education for her, for me as a 5-year-old, just to give it to her in little bits, and see how I can give her the breadcrumbs so she can sort of discover it in that way. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a huge deal. I think it's a really important thing. And it's a huge part of my life right now, like my focus, because I think it's a big part of my 5 years from now. It'll be a huge part of my future.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading an article that you did, an interview that you were in Grantland, and the reporter was mentioning how you're a very good communicator. I really love your intensity, your ethics, and your conviction, and the way you speak on things. And he also mentioned that you have a really big interest in writing, and maybe writing screenplays down the line, and developing movies. So I'm excited for all of that. Do you think does Bitcoin give you an adrenaline rush? Or does it maybe temper your adrenaline, through low time preference, or maybe both? And does it vacillate for, sometimes it gets really exciting and sometimes it's kind of calming?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's calming. I would say it's like maybe somewhat soothing when things go well, but I would say it's much more nerve wracking. And I don't know, like, the bull run is hard, man. The bull run's hard too. It's hard to stay in it and not let go of the reins a little bit. And I think the thing that, a lot of people don't realize is you have to hang on to the rock in sickness and in health. Right. And I think that's where having the personal experiences I have with like my own life volatility, having back problems and arm problems and surgeries and heartbreaks and things like that, I think that type of stuff has definitely helped me be a good Bitcoiner, and I don't know, like from like a epigenetic sense, like going through the stress that I've gone through in the last maybe 5 years or whatever financially, as a result of like buying this big dealership and like running it, learning how to run it, like having people steal from me and like all this other stuff. having bad things happen, having customers like do a fake slip and fall and like trying to sue me, like all that type of stuff has, like had a neighbor sue us, like, or threatened to sue us, like, oh, pay us 75 grand or we're going to sue you. I'm like, for what? Like, this sucks. There's just a lot of people out there that are trying to get a piece of me because I'm a celebrity or was a celebrity. Mostly because of where I am. I think that there's not we don't have like a Will Smith or a Tom Cruise or a Charlize Theron or a Ariana Grande living in Fresno, right? So in a lot of ways, I'm kind of like, and I'm not some billionaire farmer, but I was on TV at one point. So I think that's a little bit of like, I feel like I have a target on my back. And I think Bitcoin for me feels like a big defense shield. It feels like a Captain America shield that I can hide behind it. And if things get weird at work, if we have a bad month or whatever, but Bitcoin rocked, I can be like, Bitcoin protected me and kept me sheltered, and I feel like that a little bit. And that feels good. But man, the excitement of like, when I get to work and I know Bitcoin's popping, like it starts ripping at 4 a.m. and I get here at like 8 or 9 and some of my employees come in and they're like, yo, and I'm like, yo, and they're like, Bitcoin, like seeing 60-year-old dudes like get excited and you go like, Bitcoin's popping. I mean, it's hilarious. It's the best. And I think that gives me that sort of team sport, like post-game win, everyone's happy, like, oh, we're gonna dance, like, why am I doing this with my hands, like, you just get that kind of funny thing. So yeah. I love that aspect of it. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I had a couple questions left for you, but you kind of just answered one. I was going to ask you if Bitcoin felt like a team sport. You kind of addressed that there a little bit. So
it is a team sport, Cedric. It is
right. It is a team sport. I agree. So in that regard, how do we become all-star Bitcoiners?
Okay. All-star Bitcoin cheat sheet 1 through 10, right? Number 1, you got to know how to hold it, right? Number 2, you have to have more than one place that you hold it. I think that people that are like, oh, I have all of it on my Coinbase account, or I have all of it on my ledger or whatever. You have to understand the different on-ramps. Okay. That's number 2. Number 3, you have to have the ability to communicate at least a little bit of the technical aspect as a defense mechanism, because people are going to be like, oh, it's a scam. And then you're like, actually, it's 21 million ever. And the last one doesn't get popped out until the year 2140, give or take. There's 900 a day. There's going to be 450 a day in another 3.5 years. So be prepared. That type of stuff. Understanding some of the acronyms. That's number 4. Number 5, you got to read one or two of these books. I think they're great. Number 6, you got to know who the players are. You got to know who Roger Ver is and why he's a big deal and why he's, kind of a black sheep at this point because of, BCH and stuff. You have to understand the drama and the sayings and the laser eyes. That's like another one. You have to like kind of know the lingo. You have to dunk on like a gang. You at one point have to like shit post or dunk on some of these really anti-Bitcoin people on Twitter. You just have to do it. You have to get a Twitter just to do it at some point. I think that's essential. You have to convert at least a couple people into, the Bitcoin mindset, which is to say that pricing things in Bitcoin, you have to buy something using Bitcoin. I think that's a big one too. I don't think you can just hold it and say, that's it. I'm just going to hold it. That's fine. I think you do have to exchange it. That is the nature and the spirit of the weapon, right? If you just put it in the drawer and let it sit there, you're not really getting the most use out of it, right? I think you have to make a plan for the future, whether that's for your kids or your family or your wife, somebody, or for a charity. You got to have some sort of Bitcoin futurism. I do think you need to share memes. I think that's another one. You have to share memes, and you have to get at least one funny Bitcoin shirt, like the one I'm wearing, which is the UBS logo with keys and then BTC on it. That's
funny.
So I think, is that 10?
Whether it is or not, that it might have been 9, 10, or 11. I don't care. Damn, that was awesome. I would normally, ask you at this point, like, where do you want to be in the future? I'm going to let that drift off. I love that you said that we got a plan for the future and that we have to understand the nature of this weapon. This has just been so incredible and really dope for me. I just want to leave it to you for any parting words, and definitely let people know where they could find you, whether it's the dealership on Twitter, the podcast. Just let everyone know where they can get at you and any parting words that you have.
Yeah, I mean, my Instagram's easy. It's CJ Wilson Photo. I have another one that's supercar_CJ that's just about cars. I have a partner his name is Rich. He's the head of like pulmonary surgery or cardio surgery or cardiac surgery or whatever for Kaiser. He is Doc Dog. I'm Race Dog. We do a TV show / radio show called the Throttle Dogs podcast. And we are always like ships in the night, and we're trying to figure out how to get this stuff going. But my favorite thing is doing impersonations of like other car personalities and sort of like dunking on them in the same way that, you know, American Huddle is going to dunk on Peter Schiff or some of these other guys. I dunk on some of the car people that are sort of, you know, on the periphery or whatever, or maybe even in the mainstream, but people just, I want to poke holes in them. Toxic, you know, car maximalism. But yeah, you know, I'm pretty approachable. Like I enjoy I enjoy learning. I would love to collaborate with people that want to get into Bitcoin projects. I'm trying to bring Bitcoin to the agriculture industry to get some of these farmers who are all about stacking. That's like their whole life is stacking. They're super conservative. Trying to get them involved in it because I feel like if we can get mining and stuff like that happening here in the country, you know, then anything's really possible. I am a patriot, but I do feel like sometimes we lose our way. And I really think that it's good to have a healthy discussion about what we can do better as a society. And I think Bitcoin does fix a lot of these things. It might not be able to screw the light bulb back in the ceiling, but it definitely, a good money policy means that you can pay people, which is good. And we can recruit people, which is better. And we can keep people and keep talent because, you know, I think Bitcoin as an economy helps that out. So I think that's pretty much everything. But Cedric, it was great. Thank you for having me on here to ask me really good baseball questions.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, man. This has been so dope. There's a lot we didn't get to. I hope we get to do this again sometime. We didn't talk about cars that much, food, and maybe the next time we'll do it over some Nutella. This has been so dope, CJ. I really appreciate it. Peace.
Thanks, Cedric.
Thanks.
CJ Wilson, straight edge race car driver and former professional baseball player, on making the most of your opportunities, dealing with the volatility in your personal life, and 10 ways to be an all-star Bitcoiner, right here on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. And thank you for listening. If you dug the chat, please subscribe, rate, and share with your friends and family. That's the best way to spread the word. This is Cedric. Peace.